The gate announcement cracked through the terminal. Final boarding for Flight 227, 8 minutes to departure. Elias Mercer stepped forward with his boarding pass, only to find a man already planted in his seat, 2A. Graham Whitford lifted an eyebrow, sweeping Elias from shoes to collar like an inventory he didn't order. "That ticket isn't yours," Graham said. "First class has standards." Gate agent Megan hesitated, then turned to Graham first, not Elias. "Let me recheck his ticket, sir." The scanner blinked amber, not red. Manual review required. Around them, the air thickened. A phone lifted. Off-duty pilot Daniel Keene whispered to his live stream, "Something weird's happening at Gate 12. Elias steadied his breath, gripping the thin folder in his hand, its corner showing a glimpse of confidential print no one noticed. He said nothing because the injustice was loud enough for everyone else to hear. Have you ever witnessed a moment so unfair it made your chest tighten, yet you couldn't look away? Before we continue, tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And if stories about power, dignity, and truth resonate with you, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. All right, take a breath. Let's step back into the terminal, right where the story continues. The terminal's fluorescence hummed overhead, a cold, steady halo that made every hesitation around Gate 12 sharper. Megan still held Elias's boarding pass between two uncertain fingers, as if it might stain her to handle it too long. Behind her, the line of first-class passengers stalled, stacked like dominoes waiting to fall in whichever direction the gate staff decided. Graham Whitford draped his arm over the back of Seat 2A, with the lazy entitlement of someone who'd never been asked to justify belonging. He didn't look at Elias, he appraised him. "People don't just buy first class on this route," Graham said, voice pitched to Carrie. "Not his type." A ripple moved through the waiting area, not loud enough to be a reaction, but definite enough that a few heads tilted in reluctant curiosity. Elias felt the shift, the reclassification of him from passenger to problem, but he didn't let the sting settle in. He drew a breath, long and steady, the kind he practiced in boardrooms when the negotiations grew predatory. Megan finally blinked, stepping toward Daniel's livestream camera as if noticing it too late. "I'll just verify with the supervisor," she said, retreating toward the podium. The live stream had grown to a few hundred viewers, Daniel's whispered commentary drawing them in like moths circling a low flame. "Gate 12 situation escalating," he murmured. "Scanner didn't deny him, just flagged for review. That's weird." Elias adjusted his grip on the folder tucked under his arm. The laminated corner capital allocation sheet, confidential draft, pressed into his palm. Something oddly grounding about it. He'd held this very folder during the final restructuring meetings, across from the CFO who had told him, "Your capital package determines the runway of this airline." Funny how those words meant nothing here. "Sir, step aside, please," Megan called, now with another staff member at her shoulder. A younger man, the supervisor, badge-reading Kyle Brenner, approaching with the brisk confidence of someone who believed procedure always absolved him of tone. Kyle didn't greet Elias. He addressed the space around him. "Premium seats often attract fraudulent bookings," he said. "We just need to rule that out." Graham smirked at the phrasing. "See, happens all the time," he said, shrugging at the imaginary audience. "It's smart they're checking. These seats aren't exactly cheap." Something tightened behind Elias's sternum. Not anger, not embarrassment, but a quiet awareness of a pattern he'd seen since childhood. When a system hesitated, it always hesitated on him. "I'm standing right here," Elias said. Voice, even. "You can address me directly." Kyle blinked, surprised that the man he was sidestepping had a voice so controlled, so tempered. "Yes, of course," he replied quickly, but the veneer didn't hold. "We'll complete verification shortly." The live stream surged again. "He's so calm. Why's the supervisor only talking to the white dude? Scanner code doesn't match fraud flags. Something's off." Daniel angled the phone to catch both Elias and Graham in frame. "This isn't typical," he told his viewers. "This gate doesn't do extended verification for first class. unless there's a system-level mismatch. Not fraud, not usually. Graham flipped a page of the in-flight menu with exaggerated patience. "Look," he said to no one in particular, "I'm not saying he can't afford it. I'm saying people like me have seen stuff like this before." Elias turned his head slowly. "And what do people like you see exactly?" Graham froze, not expecting to be challenged with such quiet precision. He deflected. "I'm just trying to make sure this flight leaves on time." The announcement overhead answered him first. 5 minutes to departure. All first-class passengers must be seated." A soft gasp threaded through the line. Time, the great equalizer, was now an accomplice to the injustice. Kyle checked the screen again. "Still flagged," he muttered. "Megan, call revenue control. Tell them we need manual approval." Elias let out a soft breath, the kind that sounded like resignation until one listened closer. It wasn't resignation. It was calculation one he'd done in corporate halls, where decisions shaped payrolls, fleets, futures. He let the folder slide slightly into view under his arm. The embossed code on the front cover caught the LED light just enough for Daniel's camera to glimpse it, just enough for the world to notice something that looked nothing like a fraudulent booking. Still, Elias said nothing. Because speaking wouldn't make them see him. Not yet. "They're profiling him," someone in the line whispered. "Not our business," another replied, though their eyes stayed fixed on the unfolding scene. The tension didn't explode. It spread layer by layer, assumption by assumption, until the whole gate felt tilted. Graham leaned back, voice smug. "Relax, man. If your ticket's real, they'll clear you, eventually." Elias met his eyes, unblinking. "You'd be surprised," he said softly, "how often, eventually, comes too late." Daniel whispered to the stream. "He's right. With 5 minutes left, this could cost him the flight." The viewers climbed past 1,000. Gate 12 was no longer a delay. It was a stage. And Elias, silent, steady, dangerously underestimated, was stepping into the center whether he wanted to or not. The air near Gate 12 had shifted from inconvenience to spectacle. More passengers slowed their steps as they passed, sensing tension the way animals sense weather. Daniel's live stream viewer count jumped again 5,000, and climbing each new comment a flicker of digital oxygen feeding the moment. Kyle, the supervisor, returned with a tablet in hand, jaw tight with performative authority. "Sir," he said, not looking directly at Elias, "I need you to step over here. We've got an irregularity with your booking." Graham chuckled under his breath. "Told you. Happens when people try things above their pay grade." Elias let the words graze him, but not pierce. He'd learned long ago that some voices weren't weapons, just echoes of smaller rooms. "What irregularity?" Elias asked calmly. Kyle angled the tablet so only Megan could see the screen. "It's flagged as special clearance mismatch," he whispered. "I don't know what that means." Megan frowned. "Do we have a code book for that?" "No, it's not a fraud code," Kyle muttered. "It's something else." Daniel leaned slightly closer, narrating under his breath to the live stream. "That's not a blacklist alert. That's a priority flag. I've seen something like that once years ago." Graham, hearing none of this, announced loudly, "Look, man, men handle rejection differently. Don't make a scene. Just let them do their job." Several passengers turned sharply at that, some in disapproval, others in reflexive agreement. Elias stayed still, spine straight, the fluorescent ceiling reflecting faintly off the silver edge of the folder he carried. A sliver of the embossed label caught the light again, capital allocation sheet, confidential draft, but no one connected the dots. "I'm not making a scene," Elias said softly. "I'm answering accusations you keep repeating." Kyle raised a pacifying palm, as though Elias were the one erupting. "Sir, please, keep your voice down." His voice was barely above a murmur. On the live stream, comments poured in like a rising tide. Why are they telling him to calm down? He hasn't raised his voice once. This is so coded. Scanner mismatch doesn't mean fraud. Gate 12 needs training. The digital crowd had grown into a parallel audience, one with its own momentum, its own outrage, its own demand for clarity. Elias could feel its presence behind the cameras, a collective exhale held just out of sight. The gate announcement chimed overhead again. 5 minutes to departure. All first-class passengers should be seated. Each syllable pressed the moment tighter. Graham tapped the armrest of 2A, drumming a rhythm of ownership. "Just admit the mix-up," he said with casual cruelty. "We all make mistakes. Yours just happened to be buying a fake ticket." A few passengers gasped. Others averted their gazes, unwilling to touch the electric fence of what was happening. Elias's voice, when it came, was quiet but surgical. "You seem very confident about how this ends." Graham's smile thinned. "I'm confident about how rules work." Elias tilted his head. "Are you?" The question wasn't aggressive. It was observant, like someone watching the first crack spread across glass. Kyle stepped between them. "All right, that's enough," he said, though he only looked at Elias. "Sir, if you can't cooperate." "Cooperate with what?" Elias asked. "Waiting? You've asked me to wait, and I've waited." Kyle stumbled for a reply. Megan rechecked the scanner for the third time. The device chirped, then displayed the same message in amber. "Special clearance. Verify with upper-level access." She squinted. "I've never seen this code in my life." Daniel whispered to his viewers. "This is either a massive system misunderstanding or something big is about to break." The comments exploded again. "Upper-level access? Who is this guy? This feels wrong. He's being treated like a problem, not a passenger." Through it all, Elias stayed still enough that the noise around him almost softened. His calm wasn't a shield, it was an anchor, fending off the tide of assumptions, pulling at him from every direction. Kyle sighed dramatically. "Look, sir, we're trying to help you, but you're making this harder." Elias blinked slowly. "I'm standing here. You're the ones circling." The line of passengers behind them shuffled, murmuring. Graham exhaled sharply. "Unbelievable. He's playing victim." Elias turned toward him, not with anger, but with the weary precision of someone who had spoken this conversation 100 times in 100 places. "I don't have to play what the world already scripts for me." For the first time, Graham hesitated. Kyle rubbed his temples. "We need clarity. Megan, call revenue control. Tell them it's urgent, and get security on standby just in case." That last phrase, "just in case," hung in the air, like a bruise waiting to bloom. Elias closed his hand around the folder, thumb brushing its edge. That document contained the future of the very airline whose staff now questioned whether he belonged in seat 2A. Power disguised, still waiting in the wings. Daniel's camera zoomed slightly, catching the subtle motion. "Gate 12, Daniel whispered to the live stream, "is officially in over its head." The viewer count surged again. For a moment, Gate 12 shifted into an uneasy quiet, the kind that settles not because tension has faded, but because everyone is bracing for what comes next. Even the terminal's hum seemed to lower itself, as if it, too, needed to witness what unfolded. Elias stepped aside at Kyle's insistence, though the supervisor's gesture carried more performance than instruction. The small space beside the podium wasn't a private corner, it was a holding pen, a spotlight disguised as courtesy. Passengers filtered past with that awkward choreography of people pretending not to stare. A woman in a navy blazer offered a sympathetic wince. A man in business casual stepped deliberately wide, as if proximity might contaminate him. Elias inhaled through his nose, letting the sterile airport air anchor him. He lifted the folder slightly, adjusting it under his arm. The embossed label glinted again. Capital allocation sheet. Confidential draft. A quiet truth pressed against his ribs like a second heartbeat. "Revenue control isn't picking up," Megan murmured, tapping her headset. Her fingers trembled just enough for the camera to catch. "They're probably busy." Kyle rubbed the back of his neck. Great timing, he muttered. We need someone who can interpret this clearance code. Graham stretched in his stolen seat, letting his entitlement spill casually across the aisle. I mean, if the system can't recognize his ticket, he said loudly, that tells you something, doesn't it? Elias turned slightly, not toward Graham, but toward the window. A taxiing aircraft glided across the tarmac, its lights blinking in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. It reminded him of the nights he'd reviewed restructuring data until dawn, weighing payroll protection against asset liquidation. Every aircraft represented jobs, families, health insurance, dignity. He knew what it meant to keep an airline alive. The irony that he could preserve a company but struggle to claim a single seat within it was almost poetic. Daniel's livestream captured Elias's profile against the window. He looks tired, someone typed. Another replied, not weak, just tired of this kind of thing. The viewer count ticked upward. 12K, 14K, 16K. Kyle paced, pretending to manage something critical. Look, folks, he said to the watching passengers. We're trying our best to ensure everything is accurate. These things take time. Not this much time, muttered a man leaning on a suitcase. Elias heard him. He appreciated the truth, even when whispered. A gate attendant from the neighboring flight approached Megan quietly. You guys okay? Twitter's starting to talk about this. Megan stiffened. It's being live-streamed? The attendant nodded. Thousands watching. The knowledge spread like a cold draft through the staff. Their postures shifted, forming a choreography of self-preservation rather than service. Suddenly, every action was a liability, every hesitation a captured frame. Elias noticed the change, but he didn't revel in it. He knew the mechanics of panic, even institutional panic. It didn't lead to clarity. It led to more mistakes. Another announcement chimed overhead. 4 minutes to departure. First-class boarding will close shortly. Elias felt the clock press against him, but not in fear. He'd lived his life under countdowns, acquisition deadlines, board votes, merger approvals, capital infusions. His pulse didn't jump. It narrowed. I just need someone to look again, he said, directing the request not to any one person, but to the room. The scanner didn't deny anything. It just asked for higher authorization. Kyle glanced at him, irritation tightening the corners of his mouth. Sir, we understand you're frustrated. Elias cut in, gentle but surgical. I haven't shown frustration. Kyle faltered. Daniel's live stream caught every microbeat of the exchange. Comments lit up. He's keeping it together better than the staff. Supervisor dude is uncomfortable with calm black men. This is wild institutional bias. Graham scoffed. Calm or not, he's holding everyone up. Elias finally turned toward him, slow, deliberate. You keep assuming I'm the delay. Graham's brows knit, but he said nothing. Megan, voice smaller now, reported, security is on their way to assist. Assist, the softest word for force. Elias exhaled slowly. A crack of something, not fear, but fatigue, seeped through the composure he'd been holding aloft. Not visible enough to humiliate him, but enough that Daniel's camera caught the faint tremor in his exhale. The comment stream reacted instantly. He's exhausted. This isn't about a ticket anymore. Someone step in. The moment wasn't explosive. It was heavy, a slow, sinking gravity pulling every character deeper into themselves. Elias adjusted the folder once more, unconsciously. Each brush of his thumb against the embossed cover was a reminder of the world he truly inhabited. A world of capital movements, restructuring plans, survival models. But here, none of it translated. 3 minutes, the loudspeaker warned. Kyle swallowed. Megan fidgeted. Graham smirked. And Elias, standing in the narrow corridor of humiliation and restraint, understood something with crystalline clarity. This wasn't about the injustice growing louder. It was about the quiet realization that the people judging him had no idea what they were looking at. No idea who they were pushing against. No idea what truth was circling just above their heads, waiting to land. The arrival of security was not loud, just the soft thud of heavy shoes on terminal carpet, but it changed the entire temperature of Gate 12. Conversations thinned, postures stiffened. Livestream viewers leapt in number as if drawn by instinct to disaster. Officer Tomas Reyes approached with the calm, procedural expression of someone used to being summoned as the final authority. "Supervisor?" he asked. Kyle gestured toward Elias with an air of weary inevitability. "Passenger in question, booking irregularity. He's resisting the verification process." Elias blinked once. "I haven't resisted anything." But the narrative had already left his hands. Graham stretched comfortably in seat 2A, crossing his legs like a man enjoying dinner theater. "I warned him," he told the surrounding passengers. "Some people get touchy when reality catches up." A woman near the aisle winced but didn't intervene. The speaker overhead chimed again. Its timing, almost cruel. 3 minutes to departure. All first-class passengers must be seated. The pressure tightened like a noose. Officer Reyes stepped closer. "Sir, we need you to comply while we resolve the discrepancy." Elias's jaw flexed, not with anger, but with the weight of repetition. He had lived this scene in boardrooms, in hotels, in restaurants, in airports. Places built to serve everyone, but designed to doubt some more than others. "What exactly is the discrepancy?" Elias asked. Kyle raised the tablet defensively. "Special clearance mismatch. Could mean anything. Could mean fraud. Or," Elias said, "it could mean you don't know what you're looking at." Graham scoffed. "Oh, here we go." Officer Reyes lifted a hand, directing it at Elias. "Sir, please lower your tone." "My tone?" Elias said softly. "You haven't heard my tone." Live stream comments surged. "He's not yelling? Stop telling calm black men to calm down. This is textbook bias. Security is here for the wrong person." Daniel zoomed the camera closer. "This is becoming a bigger incident. You all are watching it unfold in real time." On screen, the viewer count crossed 20,000. Kyle exhaled sharply. "Look, we're trying to run a clean boarding process. Right now, you're holding up the flight." Elias turned, meeting Kyle's eyes fully for the first time. "No, I'm being held up. There's a difference." That line, delivered without force, tremored through the crowd. Even Graham shifted slightly, as if the truth behind it had nicked him. But the system pushed back. Kyle stepped closer. "Sir, final warning. If you don't comply, we will have to offload you." Elias stared at the man who genuinely believed he had authority over this moment, authority backed by a faulty reading of a system that didn't even understand the profile it was flagging. "Offload me," Elias repeated quietly. "For standing here." Officer Reyes cleared his throat. "Let's all stay calm." There it was again, that command, that coded burden placed not on the aggressor, but the target. "Calm is all I've been," Elias replied. The folder slipped slightly under his arm, and he steadied it with a reflexive touch. Daniel's camera caught it, the fourth appearance. "What is that document?" someone typed. Another responded. "Whatever it is, it matters." Graham leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You can't blame us for being suspicious. First class isn't where you test your luck." Elias looked at him not with contempt, but with a tired kind of clarity. "This isn't about luck," he said. Then, with the faintest exhale, "This isn't about a seat. It never is." The live stream detonated. Oh my God, that line. This man has lived through some things. "I feel this in my chest." Even the terminal seemed to still for a beat. Kyle, stubbornly clinging to authority, lifted his walkie. "Security, stand by. We may need removal." A few passengers gasped. Officer Reyes hesitated. For the first time, he looked not at the tablet, not at Kyle, but at Elias's face, really looked. Saw the steady restraint, the dignity under pressure, the exhaustion that wasn't personal, but historic. Elias didn't flinch, He didn't argue. He simply existed with a presence that made the threat of removal feel grotesque. Daniel whispered, "This is the turning point. I can feel it." The viewer count surged past 35,000. The pressure in the air became almost material, like one more breath from anyone might shatter it. Graham broke first. "Come on, officer," he urged. "We can't sit here all day because he doesn't know his place." The words sliced through the gate, too honest, too naked. Passengers froze. Kyle stiffened. Officer Reyes's eyes sharpened. Megan's mouth fell open. Even Graham realized too late what he had revealed. It wasn't about a ticket. It wasn't about protocol. It wasn't about a mismatch. It was about place. Elias didn't react outwardly, but something behind his expression settled, like a man confirming a suspicion he wished he'd been wrong about. The world, watching through Daniel's camera, erupted in outrage. And somewhere, deep inside the machinery of the airline, the truth that had been misfiled, misread, and misunderstood was inching closer to the surface. The next shift in the atmosphere wasn't loud, it was collective. A dozen phones lifted at once. People who had been pretending not to watch were now fully watching, recording, streaming. Daniel's live stream ballooned past 20,000 viewers, and rising by the second. Gate 12 wasn't a gate anymore. It was a stage, drowning in scrutiny. Officer Reyes seemed to feel it first. His posture straightened, eyes narrowing with a hint of unease. Not at Elias, but at the cameras encroaching from every angle. Kyle noticed too. "Everyone, please stop recording," he announced, voice pitched with a brittle urgency. "We're just trying to resolve a verification issue." But passengers ignored him. Moral spectacle had a gravity all its own. The loudspeaker chimed again. 3 minutes to departure. This is the final boarding call for Flight 227. The words carved tension into the air. Elias did not look at the cameras. He stood with the stillness of someone refusing to be reduced to a moment, even as the moment swallowed him whole. "Sir," Officer Reyes began, "softer now. If you don't comply, we may have to temporarily remove you from this area while—" Elias raised one hand, not aggressively, just enough to stop the sentence. "I've complied with every instruction." Reyes hesitated, not because he disagreed, but because he realized it was true. Kyle stepped forward to fill the silence. "Look, this code, this special clearance thing, could indicate suspicious activity." Megan glanced at the scanner, chewing her lip. That's not the code for fraud." "It's close enough," Kyle snapped. Elias looked between them. "Is that how the system works? When it doesn't understand something, it assumes the worst?" Graham barked a laugh from seat 2A, the embodiment of unearned confidence. Now he wants to lecture us on systems. Priceless. Daniel caught every frame, whispering to the live stream. "This is collapsing fast. On the airline side, not his." The viewer count spiked again. 28,000. A junior gate attendant, barely out of training, approached Megan cautiously. "I checked the code list," she whispered. "It's not fraud. It's not even irregular. It's a priority flag. High level. It says it requires corporate clearance." Megan's eyes widened. "Corporate? As in above us?" "Yes, above gate operations, above supervisor level." Kyle overheard. "Stop speculating. It's probably a glitch." The junior attendant swallowed, then glanced at Elias. "Glitches don't get locked behind corporate access." Her voice wasn't loud, but Daniel's microphone caught it. The comments exploded. "Priority flag? This man is someone important, and they don't know." "System is broken and biased." Officer Reyes shifted his weight. Something was breaking authority, assurance, maybe both. Elias remained quiet, holding the folder. The edges of it reflected the gate's LED lights, a silent metronome, keeping time with the unraveling system. Graham rolled his eyes. "You're all overthinking it. He bought a fake ticket from some shady website. Happens all the time." The junior attendant frowned. But the system didn't say fraudulent. "You're new," Kyle cut in sharply. Let us handle it." Elias's gaze softened not in pity, but in recognition. He'd once been that young. Competent, observant, ignored. The terminal speakers crackled again. 2 minutes to departure. A visible ripple of urgency passed through the staff. If they delayed the flight, they would answer for it. If they offloaded the wrong passenger, they would answer for that too. And if the live stream continued, they would answer to the world. Pressure wasn't a force, it was a sculptor. Officer Reyes exhaled slowly. "Supervisor, are we sure about removal? With the cameras, maybe we should try to resolve it another way." Kyle stiffened. "We follow protocol." "But the protocol doesn't match what the scanner says," the junior attendant murmured. Kyle shot her a furious look. Megan stepped between them, voice thin with nerves. "Maybe we should escalate to duty manager? This looks like a code above our clearance." Finally, someone said it. The first official acknowledgement that this wasn't a simple passenger dispute, that it might be a misunderstanding of colossal proportion. Graham scoffed, but his bravado dimmed a shade. "You're all jumping through hoops for nothing." Elias met his eyes calm, steady, unmovable. Strange how the people most certain of the truth are the ones farthest from it. Daniel whispered, "Oh, that line is going viral." The viewer count crossed 35,000. Kyle rubbed his forehead, tension leaking through his poise. "Fine," he snapped. "Call Harriet, the duty manager. Tell her we need upper-level clearance." The junior attendant ran. Elias closed his eyes for a brief moment, not in defeat, in preparation. He felt the swell of public pressure behind him, the shift in the room's moral center. The system was faltering under its own weight, and something inside Elias recognized the pattern. He'd seen institutions break before. He'd been hired to fix some of them. He'd watched others collapse because they refused to listen. The difference now was simple. This time, he was the one standing in the crosshairs. As the crowd murmured, as cameras gleamed, as the folder pressed warm against his arm, Elias felt the pivot approaching the moment the system would either correct itself or expose itself fully. A system that had misjudged him was now realizing it might have misjudged the entire situation. And Harriet Cole, the duty manager with corporate-level access, was less than 60 seconds away. The gate announcement struck like a warning bell. "Door closing in 60 seconds. Passengers not seated will be offloaded." 60 seconds. 1 minute. The difference between boarding and erasure, between belonging and being pushed out of the frame. Gate 12, locked into stillness eyes, cameras, and breath suspended. Harriet Cole, the duty manager, strode into the scene with the kind of presence that didn't demand attention but absorbed it. She'd clearly come from another terminal, her blazer slightly wind-ruffled, her ID badge swinging from her stride. She took in the tableau. Elias standing alone, security hovering, Graham lounging in stolen comfort, Kyle posturing with a tablet he didn't understand. "What's happening?" Harriet asked. Kyle answered too quickly. "Passenger with a suspicious booking. The system flagged it." Megan added, "Scanner showed a special clearance mismatch. We thought it might be." Harriet held up a hand. She stepped toward the podium, pulling up the internal access panel. The crowd leaned as one. Daniel angled his phone from behind a column, whispering into the live stream. "She has corporate access. She can see codes nobody else here can." Viewer count, 82,000, 89,000, approaching 6 figures. Harriet typed rapidly. The scanner flashed amber again, then displayed the same mysterious line. "Priority shareholder. Verify with upper-level access." Harriet froze. Not in confusion, but in recognition. She inhaled once, her expression tightening with the unmistakable awareness that something had gone profoundly wrong. Kyle stepped closer. "Does it mean fraud?" Harriet didn't answer him. Instead, she turned to look directly at Elias. It wasn't the look of someone checking an ID. It was the look of someone realizing she had just walked into a catastrophic misunderstanding. "Sir," she said slowly, "may I see the boarding pass you presented?" Elias handed it to her, without a word. The folder under his arm slipped slightly as he moved, and Harriet's eyes flicked toward it, a flicker of recognition at the embossed code, a detail only someone who had sat in restructuring briefings would even notice. Her breath caught. She knew that format. She had seen that exact template in investor documentation. But she said nothing yet. Daniel whispered to the live stream, "She knows something. Look at her face." The comments detonated. What did she see? This is about to flip. Please let this man get justice. Meanwhile, Graham huffed loudly from seat 2A. Finally, someone who'll deal with this nonsense. Harriet didn't even look at him. Officer Reyes shifted awkwardly, sensing a shift in authority he couldn't define. "Ma'am, do we proceed with offloading?" Harriet's head snapped toward him. No, absolutely not. The clarity of her voice sliced the tension in half. Kyle startled, but the departure, "I said no." Another chime echoed overhead. 30 seconds to door close. Passengers gasped. The gate agents panicked. Graham muttered about delay compensation. But Harriet wasn't listening to any of them. She was staring at Elias's booking, running internal clearance checks faster than most people could blink. "Mr. Mercer," she said quietly, the name settling heavily on her tongue, "did anyone from corporate reach out about this flight? Any special instructions?" Elias tilted his head. "No. Should they have?" That response made Harriet inhale sharply because it told her he hadn't used his position to prearrange anything. He'd chosen to travel like any other passenger. He'd trusted the system. And the system had failed him. The live stream crossed 100,000 viewers. Kyle hovered behind her. "Should we call revenue control again?" "No," Harriet said. "You've done enough." The words dropped like stones into water. Elias blinked, exhaustion swimming behind his composure. "Am I boarding this plane or not?" Harriet exhaled a slow, steadying breath that carried the weight of both realization and responsibility. "You are not being removed," she said, meeting his eyes fully. "Not under any circumstances." The crowd murmured. Relief, confusion, and the first hint of justice rippled outward. Graham scoffed. "Unbelievable. You're just folding because there's a camera." Harriet turned to him with a measured calm that could slice steel. "Sir, I haven't begun to address your behavior yet." Gasps erupted around them. Daniel whispered, "Oh, it's turning. It's really turning." But this wasn't about the full reversal. Not yet. It was about the moment just before truth explodes, the breath the world takes before learning it was wrong. The door timer chimed again. 20 seconds. Harriet spoke quickly into her radio. "Hold the door. Code 7 override. Executive level review in progress." Kyle stared at her as if she'd spoken in another language. We can do that?" She could. He could not. And in that silence, the hierarchy finally made sense. Elias closed his eyes briefly, not in triumph, but in a fragile, fleeting relief. Not safety, not justice. Just a moment without accusation. Harriet stepped toward him, lowering her voice. "Please stay right here. This is going to be resolved." Her expression carried the weight of someone who finally understood the magnitude of her responsibility. "Mr. Mercer," she said carefully, "I need to confirm one more detail at the corporate level." She typed a rapid sequence, accessing a layer of the system no one else at the gate had clearance to see. The scanner blinked amber, then white, then a soft executive blue few employees had ever witnessed. Priority shareholder. Level 1 access. Restructuring authorized personnel. Harriet went still. Kyle leaned in behind her, squinting. "What does that mean?" Harriet's answer came in a tone that cut directly through the noise. "It means," she said, turning toward Elias, "that Mr. Mercer is one of the principal investors responsible for this airline's ongoing restructuring and survival." The words dropped like iron. Shock rolled through the passengers in a visible wave. Phones tilted upward, screens trembling in hands that suddenly understood they were filming something that would ricochet across the world. Daniel whispered to his 120,000 viewers, "Oh my God! He's the investor! The investor!" Graham froze. His smirk died first, then the confident tilt of his shoulders, then the casual entitlement he'd worn like armor. "That's impossible," he sputtered. He can't be." Harriet cut him off, voice glacial. "He is. I've seen his name on the restructuring briefings and capital allocation documents." Her eyes flicked to the folder under Elias's arm. "That folder," she said softly, "is internal, restricted to senior finance and investment partners." The crowd exhaled collectively, a sound of awe mixed with shame. Graham's cheeks flushed a blotchy red. "I didn't know who he was." Harriet faced him fully. "You didn't need to know who he was," she said. "You just needed to respect his seat." The entire gate fell silent. It was not a reprimand. It was a verdict. Graham's mouth opened and closed, a fish gasping for water in a suddenly airless bowl. I just thought, he looked." "No," Harriet said. "Stop." Security Officer Reyes stepped back, no longer a threat, but a witness. His posture softened, regret clouding his face. "I apologize, sir," he said quietly to Elias. Kyle tried to salvage his dignity. "We acted with the information we had." "No," Harriet corrected. "You acted on assumptions." The live stream erupted. "Yes, call it out." She shut them down. "This is justice in real time." Graham shot to his feet, the veneer of superiority crumbling. "This is ridiculous. How was I supposed to know he?" "You didn't have to know," Elias said, finally speaking, his voice calm but freighted with exhaustion. "You could have just believed I belonged." The word struck harder than any accusation. Graham's face twisted not with defiance, but with the dawning realization of what he had revealed about himself. Harriet signaled to Megan, reassigned seat 2A to its rightful passenger. Megan nodded, cheeks burning. Graham sputtered, "You can't just throw me out." "I'm not throwing you out," Harriet said, unflinching. "I'm moving you to the seat you purchased and documenting your conduct for corporate review." Gasps. Whispers. Phones capturing every second. Reyes approached Graham gently, but firmly. "Sir, gather your things." Graham looked around for someone, anyone, to defend him. No one moved. Even the bystanders who shared his biases could not align with him publicly now. Not under this light. He slunk away, stripped of the unearned power he'd wielded so freely minutes earlier. Harriet turned back to Elias. "Mr. Mercer, I am deeply sorry." Elias's voice was almost a whisper. "You didn't create this moment, you just stepped into it." "And I intend to fix it," she replied. The loudspeaker crackled. "Door closing in 10 seconds, unless overridden." Harriet lifted her radio. "Override. Executive authorization. Passenger Mercer is to be seated immediately." Gasps again, this time a different kind. Respect. Recognition. Elias walked toward seat 2A, the crowd parting like a tide, not ceremonially, instinctively. A man claiming the space that had always been his. He lowered himself into the seat, hands resting over the folder that had quietly carried the truth the entire time. Daniel zoomed in as Elias closed his eyes for a beat. Not in triumph. In release. A quiet collapse on the inside, shoulders sinking just slightly as the adrenaline of humiliation unwound. The comments softened. He looked so tired. He didn't want revenge. He wanted dignity. This moment is bigger than him. Harriet faced the cameras, not performing, but acknowledging. This airline will be addressing what happened here. Harriet guided Elias away from the gate, away from the cameras, away from the rising ocean of voices demanding resolution. A small operations room sat tucked behind Gate 14, a quiet rectangle of fluorescent light, a metal table, 2 chairs, and a window overlooking the tarmac. Neutral ground. Or at least, as neutral as an airport could get after what had happened. The moment the door shut, the silence washed over Elias. Silence that wasn't peace, just the absence of public judgment. He sank into the nearest chair, exhaling a breath he had been holding for the last 30 minutes. His shoulders lowered, the weight of adrenaline, unwinding into something heavier, older. Harriet hesitated, then sat across from him. "Mr. Mercer, I owe you more than an apology." Elias didn't lift his head. "You owe me the truth. That's enough." She swallowed. "The system, the process, we failed every step of this." "No," he said quietly. "You didn't fail every step. You failed the first one, and everything after was momentum." The folder slid from under his arm and rested on the table. Its presence changed the room's gravity, the symbol of everything that should have protected him but didn't. Harriet's eyes flicked to it, then to the ground. "I recognize the format. I've been in 2 restructuring briefings. I should have." "You weren't at the gate," Elias interrupted gently. "But I'm part of the system," she whispered. He finally looked up. "So am I." That truth lingered, unexpected and heavy. A soft knock broke the quiet. To Harriet's surprise and Elias's, Graham stood in the doorway. He looked smaller, deflated, a man who had been drained of the script he'd performed so confidently. Officer Reyes hovered behind him, unsure whether he should allow the encounter, but Graham lifted a shaky hand. He began, voice unsteady. "I need to say something. Please." Harriet looked at Elias. He nodded once. Reyes stepped aside. Graham entered slowly, hands empty, arrogance stripped clean. "I didn't know who you were," he said, words stumbling over themselves. "But that's not the point. I get that now." Elias remained silent. Graham swallowed hard. "You asked me earlier what people like me see. I wasn't honest. I didn't answer because I didn't want to admit it." His voice cracked just slightly. "My father was laid off by this airline during the old restructuring. He worked luggage operations for 20 years. One day he went home with a severance envelope and no warning. It broke him." Elias's breathing shifted, not pity recognition. Graham continued, eyes glassy. "So when I see someone in a seat I can't afford anymore, I assume the worst. I assume they're part of what took everything from him." Harriet closed her eyes. Elias leaned back, exhaustion settling deeper. "And when you saw me," he said quietly, "you didn't see someone who could have been your father." Graham lowered his head. "I know. I saw someone I could blame." Silence again. Not sharp this time, soft, bruised. Elias spoke slowly, carefully. "My father wasn't laid off. He was removed because someone thought he didn't fit the image of the company. Different wound, same pain." Graham's breath hitched. Shared wound. Unexpected. Humanizing without erasing what happened. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Graham said. "I wouldn't forgive me." Elias let out a weak laugh, not mocking, tired. "Forgiveness isn't the point. Understanding is." Graham blinked rapidly, shame rippling across his face. "I thought I was protecting something, but I was just repeating what hurt me." "That's how wounds work," Elias replied. "Unless you look at them." Graham nodded, trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for all of it." He left before the apology could collapse under its own weight. Harriet remained still. Elias looked back out the window where a plane was lifting into the sky, engines glowing against the dusk. "Pain makes people do strange things," he murmured. Harriet replied softly. "And dignity makes people endure far too much." Elias didn't disagree. He simply rested a hand on the folder motif, glowing faintly under the sterile lights, and let the truth settle between them. Justice had happened publicly, but the reckoning had to happen privately. The sun had dipped low enough that the terminal windows turned into copper mirrors, catching silhouettes instead of sky. The chaos at Gate 12 had dissolved into distant murmurs, a story already escaping into phones, into feeds, into the wider world beyond the airport walls. But here, inside the quiet operations room, everything slowed. Harriet returned with her tablet pressed to her chest like a confession. "They've initiated a full policy audit," she said. "Effective immediately. All discrepancy disputes involving premium seating now require oversight from someone at my level or above. No more frontline escalation without review." Elias nodded gently. "Good. And corporate has halted your flight's departure until you're comfortably boarded," she added. "They're taking this seriously." "Too late to make it comfortable," Elias murmured. But there was no bitterness in it, just truth. Harriet hesitated. "Do you want to file a formal complaint about the staff involved?" Elias looked past her, through the window, where another plane rose like a shard of silver lifting out of its own reflection. "I want the system corrected," he said. "Not people punished. Hurt people hurt people. Systems allow it." Harriet absorbed this quietly, visibly moved. She escorted him back toward Gate 12 along a side corridor, avoiding the crowd. His steps were slower than before, not from age, but from the accumulated gravity of being scrutinized too intensely for too long. When they reached the jet bridge door, she paused. "Mr. Mercer, thank you for your patience. Most people would have cracked under that." Elias gave a faint smile. Cracking and showing it are two different things. He lifted the folder, almost unconsciously. Its weight felt different now, lighter, as if it had done its job. "You know," Harriet said softly, "that document, it saved us. Not because of what's inside, but because of what it represented. A truth we'd forgotten how to listen for." Elias considered this. "I didn't bring it for that reason." "Maybe not," she said. "But symbols work even when we don't intend them to." They stepped onto the jet bridge. Halfway down, footsteps echoed behind them. Graham appeared, no bluster, no fight left in him, just a man with too much history on his shoulders. "I wanted to say one more thing," he said, breath unsteady. "Not to excuse myself, just to acknowledge something." Elias waited. "My father," Graham began. "I told you he lost his job in the restructuring. I didn't tell you he never recovered. I spent years blaming people who looked like they were winning. I never asked who was bleeding." Elias's eyes softened. "Pain isn't a compass. It points everywhere." Graham nodded, swallowing hard. "I don't expect forgiveness." "I didn't offer it," Elias replied, not unkindly, "but I accept your honesty." That, somehow, meant more. Graham stepped aside as Elias continued toward the aircraft. Inside, the cabin crew straightened with a mixture of nerves and relief. The aisle whispered with apologies that weren't spoken aloud, but felt nonetheless. At seat 2A, the seat that had been a battlefield, Elias paused before sitting. He rested the folder gently on the armrest, his fingers brushing the embossed lettering one last time. Capital Allocation Sheet, Confidential Draft. This time, he saw it not as armor or burden, but as a quiet reminder. Influence didn't need to announce itself to exist. Harriet lingered in the doorway. "Is there anything else you need, Mr. Mercer?" Elias shook his head. "No, everything's in its place now." He eased into the seat, letting his bones sink, letting the moment breathe. He gazed out the window where the runway lights stretched like a ribbon of possibility. Before she left, Harriet said one final thing. "For what it's worth, we'll remember this, and we'll do better." Elias nodded once. "See that you do." The door closed. The engines hummed awake. The cabin dimmed to gold. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Elias watched his own reflection ghost across the window, a tired man, a dignified man, a man who refused to let the world shrink him. He touched the folder lightly and whispered the final echo line, barely audible over the rising engines. "Real power doesn't need to be seen. It just needs to put things where they belong." And with that, the plane lifted. Not into redemption, but into balance. How did this story land with you? What moment stayed in your mind the longest? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this narrative moved you, don't forget to like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that dig into the heart of justice, humanity, and power. Your voice keeps these stories alive.